What's up, guys? October's here. The mailbag's back. It's a beautiful fall day here in New England, so I'm in a good mood. I hope you guys are too. Let's jump right into it. First question comes from @GandaraChris20, who asked, what are the chances the Dustin Poirier versus Conor McGregor fight actually goes down? In the UFC, I think the chances are low. UFC President Dana White says he's issued contracts to both fighters, not that the fight's accepted or signed by any means, but that the contracts are on the table. But it seems like Conor McGregor intentionally countered that, saying that he wanted it to be for charity, which is what he proposed to Poirier in the first place and the two had agreed upon. I think that might be something that the UFC and him butt heads on. I can't believe that the UFC doesn't have something in the contracts to prevent Conor McGregor from competing in MMA, whether it be exhibitions or professional bouts. With that being said, we have seen him compete in an exhibition boxing bout a couple of years ago after he had competed in pro against Floyd Mayweather. He competed in an exhibition in Ireland, and we've seen fighters from the UFC compete in grappling matches and etc. So I'm not really sure what the rule is on that. I'm hoping somebody asks Dana, but I would say right now at this point in time, the odds have to be pretty low that a Conor versus Poirier rematch happens this December in the UFC. Question number 2 comes from Twitter user Martin Durant, who keeps it simple with this Twitter username. @MartinDurant1 asks, do you think Nick Diaz fights in the UFC in the next 12 months? And if yes, who against? I think that Nick Diaz will fight in the UFC in the next 12 months. I think that he seems to be very legitimate about his comeback. The pictures and videos that Ariel Helwani posted indicate that. If he actually did go through a practice camp, a practice, 8 weeks or so where he does weight cuts, and he looks that good, I would say the UFC would be interested. It's probably the deepest we've seen Nick actually show us hard evidence that he's ready to come back. With that said, the second part of your question, against who? Carlos Condit fights this weekend, and he has already brought up Nick or been asked about Nick during this fight week, and he's interested in that fight. That makes a ton of sense to me. I think if Condit beats Court McGee, even if he loses to him, really, you could set up that fight. Makes sense for both guys. It's a rematch of yesteryear. See where they're both at, It doesn't put too much pressure where they're fighting top contenders, kind of fighting somebody that's on their same level, so to speak. Third question is pertaining to a fighter that won last week at UFC 253. In the main event, Israel Adesanya, we have Daniel J. Edwards @JackieDan513 asking about Adesanya. Which welterweight do you think would give Adesanya a challenge if he bumped up? Well, there's a few. I think that if you look at the middleweight division, right, I actually am kind of more interested in some of the welterweight matchups. Him versus Usman would be very interesting. An inter-Nigerian clash between two of the country's finest MMA fighters, or the two finest MMA fighters that they've ever had. So I think that would be a phenomenal matchup. I think the Burns fight too would be really interesting stylistically to see how Gilbert would do. I would favor Adesanya in both of those. I don't think there's anybody at 170 he's shaking his boots about. However, we have seen the versatility of Khamzat Chimaev recently. I don't want to make the claim and come out and say that I think he could beat Izzy right now. We need to see more from him. He needs to take more steps. But at the same time, it's his versatility in fighting at 185 and 170 is something we have to consider when looking at this picture. Final question of the week comes from Brain Walsh, who asks, what is next for UFC middleweight contender Paulo Costa after his loss at UFC 253 to Israel Adesanya? All the buzz is on Adesanya right now, but I think it is important to look at the unsuccessful title challenger's next challenge, which, in my opinion, looking at the rankings, I think a fight against Derek Brunson would suit Costa well. I think Brunson would gain a lot out of that fight. It would be a good rebound stylistically for Costa, and it would be a good test for Brunson to really, if he really wants to take that jump and be, hey, I'm a contender. Take me seriously. I know I've had my losses, but I'm here, I'm improved, and I'm beating good guys. That would be the fight to make. I know some people don't like the win versus loss thing. I'm a big fan of it in instances like this. So that would be the fight that I would book. Paulo Costa versus Derek Brunson. Sean Shelby, Mick Maynard. Make it.